This is Colin McGarry, walking D-Day. It's gone from summer to winter between yesterday and today. You might wonder why later on I've got a lighter jacket on. It's because I filmed the later parts yesterday. 3 tentatives of taking Caen had failed. The assault on D-Day, the right hook through Villers-Bocage on the 13th of June, and then Operation Epsom to take Hill 112 on the 26th of June. So this was going to be the 4th attempt, and it was called Operation Charnwood. The British Second Army had taken 25,000 casualties since D-Day, including 3,300 dead. Now 38,000 replacements had come in, but this couldn't continue. There were no more men in England to call up. Now the Germans were in a similar situation. Operation Charnwood would be a direct assault onto the north of Caen. As a prelude, there was Operation Windsor, which started on the 4th of July. That was the Canadians attacking Cambe airfield and the village. Now the Queen's Own Rifles and the Royal Winnipeg Rifles managed to take Cambe village, but the 12th SS still held on to the airfield. The Charnwood would involve 3 divisions: the 3rd Canadian Division attacking from the west, the 59th Division attacking from the north, and the 3rd British Division attacking from the northeast. Now the start line was 10 miles wide, and these troops would be funneled into the town in 3.5 miles wide. The attack was preceded by naval and artillery fire, plus 500 bombers dropping 2,500 tons of bombs. The artillery support came from 400 guns and 4 warships, including the HMS Rodney, the battleship. The best time for a bombing is just before the attack starts and just in front of the attacking troops. But for Charnwood, the bombing was placed quite a way away from the attacking troops. They were worried about friendly fire, and the bombing was carried out on the evening of the 7th. But many of the bombs had 6-hour fuses to blow up as the attack started on the morning of the 8th. The bombing was criticised afterwards for not helping to attain the desired objective, but it had a marked effect on many German soldiers. Leo Frond of the 12th SS took shelter in a quarry tunnel with Ursdorf, Stier and 8 other men. Bombs were falling on the ground above them, and then one fell near the entrance, which caved in. After a short silence, someone started screaming. Ursdorf Stier calmed them down. He said, "No smoking, no talking, lie on the floor." He instructed one man at a time to go and start clearing away the entrance. After some time they saw a light and then voices of men clearing the exit from the exterior. Rudolf Kreis, also in the 12th SS, recounts that the Luftwaffe NCOs came to tell them jokes so they could have some SS rations, which were much better than the Luftwaffe rations. Then they heard the drone of bombers. He and some other men took shelter in a dugout under a bank for 50 minutes. The entrance was covered in earth. They managed to scrape a way out. One of the last bombs to fall made a direct hit on a tank. 2 other tanks had fallen in the crater. René Streif was part of the first aid team at Lycée Malherbe. A flare went up, then they heard the drone of bombers. The flak was sending tracer shells up. 1 bomber was hit and fell on Caen. After 20 minutes, all was calm. Then a second wave came. They could see the flames towards Place Saint-Sauveur. Admiral Dempsey went up with Air Marshal Broadhurst in his private plane, which was a Storch, which is a German plane. Broadhurst gave orders for the Allied flak not to fire at any planes. They flew over the bombing area. The spectacle they had was amazing. The Allied guns were firing at the Germans. The German guns were firing back at the Allies. The German flak was firing at the planes with tracer shells. All the guns in the area were in action. They were being fired at, so Dempsey said we better land. Broadhurst managed to land in a field, and there were Canadian soldiers running towards them. And Broadhurst said to Dempsey, he said, put your red beret on, you get out first, because if I get out with my blue overalls on, we'll get shot. The 12th SS defences were concentrated in the area north of Caen. I say concentrated, there weren't many of them, but they defended little hamlets like Galmanche, La Bijoude, Malteau, and with these hamlets being fortified, they had a wide field of fire and could stop a battalion. Most of the SS artillery had been pulled back to the south of the Orne, and the headquarters of the division had been moved to the Abbey aux Dames. The 16th Luftwaffe had 3 battalions spread from Lebisy down to Hérouville. Now the plan was for the Luftwaffe troops to be sacrificed to save the 12th SS. The operation was to start at 04:20, 19 minutes before dawn. This is as far as the British got on D-Day. We're just next to Lebisy. Then they were pushed back to Bierville. Bierville is just there, the other side of the valley. The operation was to start at 04:20. The 3rd British Division, advancing from Bierville, were to attack Lebisy village, which is over there, and the woods as their first objective. Lieutenant Harry Jones saw a German advancing towards them with their hands up. His sergeant went forward to accept the surrender of the German, and suddenly the Germans threw grenades. Fortunately, nobody was hurt, and Lieutenant Jones stopped his troops from shooting the German because they were so angry, and he was escorted back to the front line. It was the 2nd Royal Warwicks and the 1st Royal Norfolks to attack Lebisy. Farther to the east, it was the 2nd Lincolnshires attacking Hérouville. Now here at PLaine, which is just north of Caen, this was the front line for a month after D-Day. From here the 59th Division started off on the Charnwood operation. Behind those trees is the Château de la Londe, that was held by the Germans. And in that direction is Caen. In front of us you can see the Colombelle steelworks. To the left of the image you can see the Château de la Londe. And then in between Colombelle and here is Lebisy and Hérouville. So that was where the 3rd British Division was starting. To the south we can see the Caen Hospital, which was outside Caen at the time. It's on the rise. Caen is just beyond that. That was their objective. And over that way we can see Villons-les-Buissons and Carpiquet airfield behind the dark ridge. It was a Royal Ulster Regiment that captured PLaine on the 9th of June, and they were here for a month holding out against the Germans. Château de la Londe is the other side of those trees, the other side of the field. This wall was part of the defences of the British soldiers. And just over here is the British cemetery at PLaine. We're just north of PLaine here. Now just up there you can see that building. It's a farmer's co-op. Just the other side of that is the junction that the Canadians missed. They were coming down this road from Courseulles. This road of course leads to Caen. They were to turn right to that junction to go towards Carpiquet. They missed the junction, and it took them a long time to get back in order again, and that's when they stopped. That's all in my video about the Canadians against the 12th SS. Now this way, we're looking towards Caen. This is the type of terrain that all the troops attacking were to cross. Great tank country, except just southeast of PLaine was this little hamlet of Galmanche, where there was an effective strong point. 2 brigades of the Staffordshire Division would attack along each side of the D79, which is over there. The South Staffordshires would attack towards here, Galmanche, and the North Staffordshires the other side of the road towards La Bijoude. Now in this hamlet there was only a small group of men, but with anti-tank guns, machine guns and a few mortars, they could stop whole brigade. They used the stone buildings here as defences, and you see the field of fire they had across the landscape. They could hit anything. The experience of the troops showed its value here. The 59th Division were raw troops coming up against battle-hardened 12th SS Division. The 3rd British Division, coming from Lebisy, were coming up against Luftwaffe troops, and Luftwaffe troops weren't really trained in ground combat, so they advanced pretty rapidly, and the 59th Division were held up against these strong defences. The same thing happened on D-Day. The troops from Gold Beach going towards Arromanches were attacking the radar station at Arromanches, and they came up against Luftwaffe troops there, and they were easily overcome. See my video on Gold Beach. It was the time for the Canadians to start moving. Now on the 7th of June, they'd gone from Villons-les-Buissons through Buissons, through Orty on the way to Cambe, and by the end of the 7th of June they were back here at Villons-les-Buissons. So they'd been at Villons-les-Buissons for a month, and they'd been in range of the German artillery and mortars all that time. So this became known as Hell's Corner. There's a mortar embedded in the wall there. Now we're just here on the outskirts of Buissons, and that way is Villons-les-Buissons, where the Canadians started. Now the Germans mounted a counterattack with Panthers and Mark IVs. This was repulsed using Achilles and 17-pounder guns. Now an Achilles is an M10 with a 17-pounder gun mounted on it, and 13 Panzers were knocked out. Now on the 7th of June, when the Canadians had been coming this way to attack Cambe, then they were being repulsed by the Germans. The Canadians were using some anti-tank ditches here, which were built by the Germans, as defence positions. Now today, on the 8th of July, it was the Germans using the anti-tank defences as their defence positions against the Canadians. D Company of the Highland Light Infantry, commanded by Major Anderson, were the first into Buissons. The Germans set up a stiff resistance, hoping that they would be reinforced by reinforcements from Abbey d'Ardennes, which is over there, where the regimental headquarters of the SS was, but they didn't come. So by 1430, Buissons had been cleared, but shells rained in for most of the day. The Allied maps showed that the highest ground in this area was south of Buissons this way, but in fact the highest ground in this flat plain was at Saint-Contest, which is over there. By 1500 hours, 4 tanks had occupied the area at Saint-Contest, and then some anti-tank guns were installed, and then they were attacked by 12 Panzers. 8 of them were destroyed. In Buissons there's still houses with marks of the battle on. The 9th Canadians Infantry Brigade now advanced from Villons-les-Buissons and Caen. They faced stiff opposition around Buissons. At Grouchy, which is over there, they mounted a massed attack with Bren gun carriers with all guns blazing and burst their way through. By 1530, the North Nova Scotias had captured Orty, which is over there, and the Glens had captured hamlet of St. Louis, which is just here, and the chateau. Lieutenant Foster in his Sherman fired at a 20mm anti-aircraft gun with a machine gun. The traverse of the anti-aircraft gun was damaged, A Foster drove his tank into the gun to smash it. A German then popped up from the hole and threw a grenade at the tank, which nearly killed Foster. A duel ensued with pistols, and the German was finally killed. And then from the turret of his tank, Lieutenant Foster dropped grenades in all the foxholes he could see. A German Panzerfaust penetrated the tank of Sergeant Taylor, but it just damaged the rations box. As they advanced further, they could see the Germans pulling out of Cambe airfield, which is just the other side of the main road over there. If those industrial buildings weren't there, we could see the airfield from here. Now the Canadians now turned eastwards to go towards Caen. The British unit, the Inns of Court Reconnaissance, moved along the N13 with the Canadians, and they entered Caen by here. Now this says D9A, but this was the N13 at the time. With the Inns of Court Reconnaissance being just 3 miles from the 3rd British Division, the 12th SS, which was facing the Canadians that way, and the 59th, they risked being surrounded. And in the middle, the 59th was still having a hard time against the 12th SS. Galmanche and Malon were still holding out. Now this junction here used to be a Y junction, and the road to the left went to Douves, and this road to the right went to Lyon-sur-Mer, and that was before they made the bypass. So now this is a little side street that you can just park in. Now on the evening of the 7th, Admiral Rodney sent salvos onto Point 64. This is outside of Caen at the time. This was also the objective for the King's Shropshire Light Infantry. They might wonder what was so special about this place, but if we look the other way, you see it has a commanding view over Caen. Phase 2 for the British started at 11 o'clock, but the morning fighting at Lebisy had weakened the Luftwaffe so much that the phases became irrelevant. By 1600 hours, the King's Shropshire Light Infantry had taken Point 64. And they were now just a stone's throw from Caen. Now just up there is Point 64. Now most of the concrete bunkers are on the beaches, the Atlantic Wall, but in 2019 they built this block of flats, and when they dug the excavations they found a concrete bunker here. So somewhere inland. There's one in Bay here as well. The headquarters of the 12th SS had been moved from Abbey d'Ardennes to the Abbey aux Dames. From the Abbey aux Dames, we can see right across the town to the Abbey aux Hommes. Now that house over there survived. The abbey wasn't damaged, but this church here, St. Gilles, completely demolished. Just these few arches remain. Mayer had been given permission by Sepp Dietrich to retreat south of the Orne. Just before midnight, the 21st Panzers were ordered to retake Point 64. But when they learned that the 12th SS was retreating, this was abandoned. During the night of the 8th, the patrols from the 3rd Division met up with the Inns of Court Reconnaissance. It wasn't until the morning of the 9th that the Canadians entered the Abbey d'Ardennes, the scene of the massacres on the 7th of June. See my video of the Canadians against the 12th SS. On the morning of the 9th, the 59th Division continued their advance. The 33rd Armoured Brigade took Couvrechef. The troops moved into Caen on the backs of the tanks of the 31st Armoured Brigade, but they were hindered by craters and 6-foot piles of rubble. There were only snipers and mortar teams left to hinder the advance of the Allies. The plan for the tanks to race to the bridge on the river was impossible. Now the race to the river couldn't be carried out by the tanks because of the rubble. By 12:45 the troops arrived here. Now there was a strong German presence the other side of the river. There were 2 bridges crossing, and so it was impossible to get across then. Colonel Rolk made a counterattack, but that was repulsed. And by now the Canadians had finally taken Abbey d'Ardennes as well as the Cambe airfield. Caen must have been pretty secure when this photo was taken. Those tankers are relaxing, and the photographer stood up in the street while he got the soldier to lie on the ground to pose just on that corner there. The pre-war population of Caen was 54,000. It was bombed on D-Day and then several times afterwards, and then this massive bombing for Charnwood, the population went down to 20,000. Many people left. They took shelter in these quarries here, which is where the Caen stone was quarried for years. And this is an entrance here. So these tunnels go for miles under Fleury-sur-Orne. Disused now. For some time after the war, they used as mushroom growing caves. Of those that stayed in Caen, many took shelter in the abbey aux hommes. So the 12th SS were in the abbey aux dames, and the population were sheltered in the abbey aux hommes. Both these abbeys built by William, and both built in Caen stone. This is the facade of the abbey church to the left, and in front of us the old Lycée Malherbe. The many celebrations here after the liberation. The facade of the church has stayed pretty much the same as it was when it was built. The bottom is a square with the towers on the top. It was designed by Lanfranc. That was William's favourite monk and architect. Now, Caen is built on the confluence of the Odon and the Orne. It's a very marshy area. Now, bigger buildings like churches were built on oak piles, and over the centuries the oak piles have started to warp, and that's why this church is leaning. You can see it by the line of the modern buildings. And the bombing plan for Caen was to be in a rectangle north of the city, or just north of the chateau really, but 80% of Caen was destroyed. Now that figure's been disputed since by some researchers, but anyway, you can see most of Caen has been rebuilt. Now the first Westminster Abbey was built with Caen stone, as was Tower of London and Durham Cathedral, and the 2 abbeys in Caen, and the Empire State Building, the lobby of it, is faced off with Caen stone. And all these buildings are faced off with Caen stone as well. It's this sort of cream coloured limestone. It's very good for building because it's quite soft to work with, but it hardens so it resists well over the time. The rebuilding took 25 years. Now when you rebuild a town that's been destroyed like that, normally you clear away the rubble and start building. But here actually just flattened out the rubble, so that made the ground rise by 3 foot, and they built on top of that. Now this situation with the river cutting between the Allied troops and the Germans was going to continue another 10 days, and that situation is going to be changed by Operation Goodwood. Now, with Operation Charnwood coming to a close, that was a signal to start Operation Jupiter. That was a continue where Epsom had left off. So subscribe to be kept informed of the next videos and give a thumbs up, that helps the channel. Back at this cemetery at PLaine, many of the soldiers buried here are part of the Staffordshire Regiment who took part in Charnwood in the 59th Division.